This feature is part of a leadership series and comes to you from Reflexive Lenses Private Limited, a leadership consulting firm that houses the powerful Existential Universe Mapper or HUME framework. Our leadership series focuses on a number of contemporary issues facing individuals and organizations. I'm Anand Karthikeyan, a leadership coach, consultant, and a HUME practitioner. I'm excited to have with me Ashok Malhotra, whose introduction will not do justice to the multifaceted personality that he is. He is the author of the HUME framework. He is also one of the founder members of Sumedas, an author of multiple books, a director on boards of many Indian companies, and above all, a gifted teacher and communicator and an insightful observer of human processes. Today we'll pick on a topic that's so integral to our life, work. When we hear this word work, it brings out very strong and multiple feelings and associations in all of us. So much has been talked about the future of work in recent times, especially keeping in mind the current COVID crisis. In this feature, we will explore the nature of our relationship with work. Writer Annie Dillard famously said, "How we spend our days is of course how we spend our life." For many of us, a large portion of these days is spent at work. In fact, the average person probably spends 90,000 hours of work over a lifetime. So for most of us, work equals life. There was a time when life was simple. We had a 9 to 5 timeline, we had a certainty of employment, an uninterrupted career, and a satisfying retirement. We can safely say that those days are over. Today, the employer-employee relationship dynamic is one of the most complex aspects of the organization. In these VUCA times, an important question to ponder over has been if there is a fundamental shift in our relationship with work as compared to that of the past. Now dial up the complexity, introduce a crisis like COVID, and observe the further collapse of boundaries between work and life. As we deliberate whether it's work from home or live at work, what is happening to this all-important relationship with this work factor? So Ashok, my first question to you is, let's talk about this complex relationship, work and us. For many of us, work is such an integral part of our identity. When we are asked who we are, we end up spelling out who we work for and what our job title is. So how did this all originate? Has it always been this way, or was there a different time when a different perspective was practiced?
Hi, Anand. It's great to talk to you. And it's a very significant question that you have raised. Often the relationship with work is taken to be the same as relationship with organization. There is a difference here, and it's important to make this distinction that our relationship with work is not the same thing as our relationship with the organization where we work. You asked about historically what it has been, and I think what you said about work being an integral part or work becoming an integral part of us, it would be more accurate to say that work was always an integral part of us. I think it is only post the Industrial Revolution and with the concept of the limited liability organization that organization came in as an intervening variable. What I mean by that is that our work got our work life became synonymous with our organization life, as though the organization became the primary source through which we worked.
Right.
The intimate relationship between the individual and the organization, in a sense, got broken. And now you had this another entity, an abstract entity called the organization, which in a sense became the medium through which all our work happened. So relationship with work is one thing. Relationship with organization is quite another, and often the two get mixed up. In many ways, the alienation from work, the split between work and life is a product of the post-industrialization society. Perhaps before that, work was a lot more integral, a part of an individual's living process as such.
Wow, this is really interesting. What you're saying is, from a historical perspective, work was really synonymous with us. Work was our identity. There was no real separation or confusion with this identity as such. The interesting thing, of course, is that we had full control over this. And post the Industrial Revolution, it would seem that we have handed over this very critical part of ourselves to a third party. And now we depend on this third party to feed our identity. And that's a very sobering thought. Is there any light at all at the end of this tunnel?
You know, as you rightly said, that post the Industrial Revolution, you had this organization who owned my effort, my skills, and more importantly, the output of my effort. The time I spent with my organization, in a sense, became not my time. It is someone else's time. Uh, there are reasons to believe that we seem to be going back to separating work from organization and examining them distinctly. That now, once again, in a manner of speaking, there is a possibility that the intimate relationship between the individual and the work can resurface, and we do not necessarily say that work is only organization. In a sense, the individual today is better placed to claim ownership of his or her work than we were a few decades back.
No, that is significant, and this is really also very hopeful to people listening. So, can you tell us more? Why is this change happening now?
I think the most important reason for this change is that the success factors for the organization have changed. The success factors for an organization till a few decades back were primarily tangible factors. Tangible factors like your technology, your money, the resources you had, the product market mix that you engaged with. And so long as these things were in place, you needed human beings only to put in the requisite effort. What the organization needed was essentially a pair of hands. That we'll tell you what you do, you give in this time to us, you give us your effort, and we will decide how to use that effort. Now, what has happened that the success factors have become a lot more intangible, which means that the dependence of the organization on human ingenuity, creativity, and more importantly, the quality of engagement of the individual with the organization has become a lot more important. What this also means that the balance of power, which clearly was in favor of the organization till some decades back, has gradually began to shift. I won't say that, they have both the individual and the organization have become, the balance has been totally restored, but has been significantly correct. So in a sense, the individual is now engaging with the organization on a lot more equal footing than the individual did earlier. The dependence of the individual on the organization is decreasing. So some of the manifestations of this, of course, are that there are many, many people who are today who like to be self-employed, who want to be, engaging with multiple organizations at the same time, who have contractual relationships. And, some time back, you joined an organization and you assume that you will be in that organization and you will spend all your time there and you'll retire from that organization. That's no longer the case. Today, people, or it's said, people now today don't join organizations, they join assignments. So, in a sense, the individual has, even if you remain with an organization and don't become a self-employed person, you still have taken the responsibility of managing your career by yourself a lot more than you did earlier. You are not expecting the organization to manage your career. So, in some ways, the individual is not delinking the dependence on the organization from the relationship with the work. Does that
Right.
answer your question?
Yes, and I think you seem to be saying, as you rightly said, that there is a balance of power that seems to be shifting to individuals, and that's a very hopeful sign. And as an individual, I would also find this highly empowering because the individual seems to be going back and reclaiming their identity, which was true of a historical context. This change appears both fundamental and transformational. I wonder what this means for individuals as this change process is unraveling for them.
Well, I think it potentially can mean a lot. As you said, it can be, it can generate a certain sense of insecurity in the individual because you do not necessarily have the same sense of a security blanket which an organization provides. So, in a sense, the individual becomes a little less employment centric and will be required to become a lot more work centric. The primacy is no longer with employment.
Hmm.
Often employment and work are confused with each other. Your primacy is with work. This is the work that I'm doing. So you are on your own and you are doing that work. And today you are engaging with organization A or organization B or with multiple organizations at the same time. What this also means is that this provides an individual to have a much, if I may say, wholesome relationship with work. When you have given up, when you are operating from the stance that, look, this is the time which I have given to the organization and the organization, decides what to do with my effort. The organization decides what to do with the output of what I'm producing. Then in many ways, the only thing that you can look for is fulfillment of your material needs or advancement in a socio-economic sense. So it's only, it's very interesting, for instance, that the term compensation is used. It's
Hmm.
used even today by many people. So in a
Yes.
sense, you are giving the time and you are being compensated for it. So now once you take the relationship with work becomes significant, then there is no question of compensation per se. There is, of course, a money that you get, there is an exchange, there is an exchange of value, yes. But your focus is on work. So now work is no longer just a means of your fulfillment of your subsistence needs or socioeconomic needs for socioeconomic advancement. Work also becomes a way for you to express yourself, to bring in your own creativity, your own ingenuity. So there is a lot more of a personal, emotive, affective link that an individual and a more wholesome link that the individual can have with the work rather than in a setting where you say, okay, this is, not my time, this is an organization's time, and I can only be compensated for it.
Right, a very powerful work-centric versus employment-centric, and you spoke about how the individual can reclaim his relationship with work, and as a result, develop a more personal intimacy with his or her own work. Mike,
Simultaneously, if I may just add
sure.
that, simultaneously, a relationship of interdependence with the organization.
Right.
That, it's no longer a dependent relationship.
Yes.
That I need the organization needs me. We are two autonomous, interrelated entities which are interacting with each other.
Right.
It's very easy for us to say that an individual is a part of an organization. We often forget to see that the organization is part of an individual. They're
Right.
two autonomous entities which are interdependent. So it moves from a dependency relationship to a lot more interdependent relationship.
Right. Ashok, you also spoke about this relationship between the individual and work that's getting highly personal now, and the individual chooses to claim it, like they see fit. what does it do to some of the traditional parameters that we used to hold sacred, as we were growing up, saying, the organization is sort of a community, it's like a family, and an individual has a very strong sense of belonging and loyalty to that community or organization. So what does it do to that community feel or sense of belonging, this so-called autonomous node approach?
You see, that is a different thing. If the organization is still is a community,
Right.
the organization provides an opportunity to the individual to engage in multiple ways, not just in terms of tasks, but also in terms of relationships, also in terms of engaging with other people, also to fulfill your affiliative needs.
Yeah.
So the fact that there is a sense of community, that remains. Your membership in that community may not be permanent. Your membership in that community may be transient. You may be a member of one community, or you may be a member of multiple communities at the same time. So the sense of community need not be diluted. Oftentimes, we end up assuming that since it's a community, therefore all the membership must be permanent, all the membership must be for all times to come. So it becomes an exchange of safety and security versus loyalty. Here, what we are talking of commitment. When I'm talking of autonomous, I'm also talking of interdependence. I'm not saying, autonomous in the sense that there is no affiliative link between the individual and the organization. Of course, there is an affiliative link, but this affiliative link is of an interdependent nature.
Correct. And the loyalties are on both sides. It's not necessarily only the employee who has to demonstrate.
The commitments, I would say commitments are on both sides. Both sides have a commitment to each other's well-being, each other's wholeness, and appreciation of each other's independence from each other. For instance, sometimes we have all these notions like work-life balance. I've never understood what does it mean. Does it mean that there is a split between work and life, as the work is separate and life is separate? But actually what we mean by work-life balance is time spent in the organization and time spent outside the organization.
Right.
When you are in the organization, you are not working all the time. And even when you are at home, you are doing a lot of work. So the work is integral to human beings. Similarly, people say, bring your whole self to work. I don't know what that means, because when you say bring your whole self to work, you would bring all kinds of, your vulnerabilities, your dysfunctionalities, etc. More often than not, what is being said is that only bring those parts of yourself which are relevant and appropriate.
Absolutely. Whatever's convenient.
Yeah, whatever is convenient. So, in terms of what the individual brings in and what the individual does not bring in, primarily was being determined, and to a large extent is still being determined, by the boundaries and preoccupations of the organization.
Got it. So I understand that for individuals, this is quite a transformational change, and it's also a change in mindset in the way they start looking at their roles and work in the future. What about organizations? How do you think they should be dealing with this change? What mindset changes could they adopt?
Well, first of all, they need to look at their members in a composite manner and not just as resources. We all use the term human resources, and I find that term rather distasteful because it kind of converts human beings into
things.
into things.
Yes.
So they need to look at, here is a human being.
It's almost an oxymoron, right? Human and resources. Right?
It's absolutely right. It's an oxymoron. You dehumanize by calling the person a resource. Only a resource. I'm not saying the person is not a resource. Of course, human being is a resource. The organization is also a resource. So there are resources at play on both ends. So you need to look the individual as a composite human being. You need to respect that this individual has identity of his own, which is independent of the organization, has a life of his own or her own, which is independent of the organization. And I think entry of women has done a great service in this respect. It has made organizations recognize, till they were only men, there was a sense that all their time can be easily gobbled up by the organization. But I think it's entry of women which has created this, you know in a sense, push the organization to recognize that the individual has a life of her own, you know beyond the organizations.
Sure. And we can see how this is such an import of the Industrial Revolution era, homogenizing the entire lot, right? So with this
Absolutely.
diversity, you get multiple perspectives.
Yes, absolutely. See, and therefore, once you do that, then you have to revisit your notions of control. Because if your idea is that this employee has given 8 hours of her life to me, then you kind of assume that you must have a complete control over it. So you want to, make sure that those 8 hours are being fully utilized by you. You have complete, power over them. So your emphasis goes on how to control. I sometimes hear, even now with after COVID, many people working from home. One of the concerns that people have is, how do we know whether the person is working full time or not working full time and not doing other things? At one
Yes,
level, it should be. That's a question which is an absurd question. You
absolutely.
should be concerned with what the person is offering, what the person is, giving in terms of what the person's is, whether the person is delivering to what the person is expected to deliver, rather than be worried whether you have the complete control over her time or you don't have a control over that time. So long as this control mindset remains, it will be very difficult for organizations to appreciate and accept. Simultaneously, they need to stop infantilizing employees. I find, many times many times with good intention, organizations treat their people as children, either children who need to be controlled or children who need to be taken care of. And there is almost like anxious parents, that we must look after them and we must make sure that they are doing the best that they can do, etc. This degree of infantilization in prevents human beings to get over this entire dependency relationship with the organization. So there are several things which the organization will need to revisit.
And this is really powerful because this requires a fundamental shift in the way organizations also look at people. And like you rightly said, this whole notion of control and infantilizing also comes from treating employees as things or resources as opposed to humans. How difficult or easy is this transformation, Ashok? Both in the minds of individuals as well as organizations. Is this a long journey? Is this something that has already started? Where are we in this whole timeline?
Well, I think what we are with is a long history of human evolution. These mindsets that we are talking about haven't come in yesterday. They have evolved. They have, been there for, at least a couple of hundreds of years, very strongly in the, last 100 odd years or so. So at this point in time, I wouldn't be surprised that what I'm saying may sound very threatening, both to the individual and to the organization. And people may feel, may see, look, it is easy to talk about all this, but after all, it is my organization which decides in terms of whether I get my money or not get, or whether I get promotion. So, your mind is so accustomed to thinking that
Yeah.
you can't get over it overnight. So it is going to be a long journey, both for the individual as far as also for the organization. But
Yeah, and
I think it is that journey is inevitable, whether we like it or not. This is
yes.
going to happen.
And you're saying it's a more fundamental structural shift that's happening, and you're already seeing some clues, and you'll see more of that manifesting over the years to come.
That's right. Yes.
So Ashok, wonderful, very powerful points, and you spoke about significant transformation in the way we look at our work, we look at our lives, and including how organizations can look at their people. How can you summarize, what your key conclusions are that an individual like me can draw from this?
Well, I think if I may repeat some of these, first, very significant is separate work from organizations. Do not equate the two. Relationship with work is different, relationship with organization is different. A second would be to learn to look at oneself as an autonomous node, interdependent, but also autonomous. Invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Invest not just in your skills and competencies, but also in terms of your, you as a human being. Corollary of it is to move away from dependency on organizations to a lot more, standing on your own feet. Whether or not you are employed in an organization or not is not important here. Of course, if you are self-employed, it becomes self-evident. But even if you are in an organization, manage and put a boundary on your degree of dependence. Also, in this, it can at times be very tempting to look at yourself only as a bundle of skills and competencies, as though you're a product that who has to, go and trade with multiple organizations in what is it called, gig economy or something like that.
Right.
But that I'm a complete composite human being. That work is not just a source of socio-economic advancement and sustenance. Work is me. Work is a way in which I express myself, my creativity. Work is a way in which I relate to other human beings. Work is a way in which I feel meaningful with myself. And of course, it also provides me safety, security, fulfillment of my material needs. So reclaim the beautiful relationship that we have with work rather than make it secondary and outside of ourselves. This will naturally require some degree of self-reflexivity, some degree of asking of oneself as to what does work mean to me. These are some of the things that I would say.
This is really wonderful, Ashok. I think you've given us a lot of things to think about, and these are not small changes. These are big transformational changes, and hopefully these changes help us in getting better, both as individuals and organizations. Thank you so much for being here. In the follow-up episode, we will deep dive further into how this individual can look at their relationship with work, how they can deep dive and look at their own struggles around this complex relationship with work and how they can navigate through this effectively. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anand. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much.